I've been joking, and we have an infrared light over her nest so we can see her at night. And I said, I think I'll just change it to red instead of infrared.
Now there goes her reputation.
That's right, but I'm a Butte girl. What can I say? Yeah, it's fun. It's been really interesting to me how deep relationships and real connections can be made over the internet if you are able to communicate with each other over time.
Yeah.
That seems to be.
Yeah.
And so I consider many of the people who are associated with this to be really personal friends at this point. Let's see if we're ready to roll. Hey, Mackenzie, are we ready to get started?
Yeah, I think so. It looks like a lot of people are finding their way over, and you should go ahead and get rolling.
Thank you, Mackenzie.
I'll chime in on this every once in a while if you'd ask for questions, and I'll just try and leave you guys alone otherwise.
Thank you very much.
Does he have a way of beeping it to show he has a question waiting?
Yeah, he can beep the.
Yeah, he can give us a
He can give us a
signal.
little zap. Well,
Awesome.
good
Please.
afternoon to everybody.
No.
Good afternoon to everybody. This is Suzanne Miller at Dunrobin Ranch, Lolo, Montana, and welcome to the fourth in our Western Women's book series. Our on-site host is on my left here, as you have come to know and enjoy. That's Judy Blunt. And with us from Florida, from a ranch, by the way, in Florida. You can see the horse art behind her as she speaks. We are delighted to have Laura Bell to talk with us about her really incredibly beautiful book, Claiming Ground. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here.
Thank you. Our online host, Diane, had to bow out this evening. She had a long time birding trip planned, and they changed the departure date, so she had to leave today. But she helped us formulate the questions. We met twice online and discussed the book. And I assume, Laura, that you got the email that I sent you that has the list of discussion points that we wanted to address.
I did. I didn't have a way to print it out, but I did read through them.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we will be reminding as we go along, and absolutely don't be afraid to begin a new topic, because you, of course, know your experience more than we do as readers, and we're always eager for the story behind the story. So.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let me first just say that I just found a great deal in this book that sang to me personally. I've had some parallel experiences, different in context, but I think similar in some ways, and I think I expressed some of those in an email. I've spent time in Alaska with fishermen, and I found your description of the sheep herders and the ranchers, and that the male-dominated loner kind of culture, it really resonated with me. So I just really, really enjoyed this book on so many levels: the geography, the subject. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I think that is a continuing. If we were to expand this and keep going, we would find almost every Western woman writing is going to have the same discovery upon the publication of their book or the telling of their story, that they are people in urban areas identify with certain parts of our story. The geography is different, sometimes the era is different, but there are some things that are just universal. And in my book, it was the sort of advent of feminism in the 60s and 70s, and there were people that were living in the patriarchal communities in New York City that identified with my experience in eastern Montana. So
absolutely universal.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with one of the passages that we, as a group, found very revealing, and that is, you wrote, "I wanted to ride the pendulum of experience in the opposite direction to see who I might be if I left the country of my failures behind." And I felt throughout your book that there was a contradiction. In what you did, your self-confidence came through in abundance. I mean, you tackled chores and you tackled circumstances that you were unprepared for, and you just did them. And yet, I also found in your book that you focused a lot on your failures, that was a reoccurring theme, and I'd like you to address that the confidence to go out to this new, very rugged landscape and to do this on your own, and yet this questioning of yourself.
Yeah, and first let me just say thank you to all of you for reading the book and reading it so carefully. It's such an honor. You know, I think that in leaving my home, I was both fleeing and I was drawn to. I was drawn to a landscape and a lifestyle that certainly I had dreamed about in my childhood and just resonated with me. So there was a very positive draw that took me out west. But it was also what was easy for me. And for other people, going to graduate school, taking a job, doing well might have been the easier path. But for some reason, that seemed just beyond my reach. I didn't have the self-confidence. And I did feel like I had lived in a situation, a family, the minister's family in a glass house, and felt very, very judged by everyone. And growing up through the years, I came to understand that that was not necessarily true. So I still doubt myself. I mean, that's part of who I am. But I have grown a lot braver, I think, in terms of being with people and communicating and being more intimate and not as afraid. I think as I've gotten older, I've come to understand that most people feel that way. They just act on it in a different manner.
Yeah.
Well, where did that self-confidence in the physical realm come from, Laura? I mean, you really tackled some difficult situations by yourself. And at least in the book, there was no sense of complaining. I didn't hear fear in your voice when you were describing those circumstances.
I got it from my mother. You know, my mother is someone who's just like, she wants to get a big job done by herself before anybody notices and can help her, which is kind of unnerving sometimes. But as I got older, I came to appreciate the things that I had gotten from my parents, and my mother has a lot of courage in that respect and a lot of physical ability and a can-do attitude.
Yeah.
No whining. No whining allowed.
No whining. That sounds so familiar from being raised among women who did without seeming to do, and that their pride was in always having a pair of white gloves in case somebody would show up that they wanted to impress, and they quickly pull the white gloves on over their work-worn hands so that their calluses and such wouldn't show. And it's supposed to appear to have been done effortlessly, which I rebelled against almost instantly as a youngster. I did. I wanted credit.
Well, your mother was definitely a major player sort of in the background in this book. There were several passages that I marked where I remember you're saying, during the visit that you so beautifully described, their first visit to you and the sheep wagon, and her inability to understand what brought you here and what kept you there, and then going at the end of the book, bringing her back in, and it seemed like just what you said, you wove into this book, where your lack of appreciation for who she was and maybe lack of connection grew as you grew older and understood. Is that a fair?
Sure, that's very fair. You know, my mother, who is very much alive and lively right now, about to turn 93, she has never been a nurturer. She's an amazing, amazing woman, and she is still traveling and speaking and learning and teaching. But she was a hard mother in many ways, and I succeeded, I think, by staying out of her way, kind of staying under the radar. And when I got her attention, it was usually in a negative way. And so I would step aside, go to my room and read, go with my horses. And then finally, when I had finished college and completed my tasks, I slipped away without a fight. Just slipped away. But as I've gotten older, I have come to understand, I mean, it is a cliche, but true, how much I've gotten from each of my parents, how much of me comes from them, how much of what I love about myself comes from them. And I feel really grateful that they've lived long enough and I've lived long enough that we get to cherish each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think so much can be done when we quit seeking approval. Mm-hmm. When we get accomplished enough and set enough in our own lives that we no longer have to have approval to feel right, that there is, for me anyway, this sense of generosity, that it no longer matters so much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, very. One of the things that you left out of your book, and that I was curious about, is your history with horses before Wyoming. And you just mentioned it right now. You said you would go to your horses. And you also said in the beginning statement here that this was a landscape that you had been drawn to even before you went. Could you tell us a little bit about that, about your horses, and about how the West became a draw to you?
Actually, we went out west when I was 8 years old, our first camping trip that was a month long, and went all through the national parks. And I was such a little tomboy, and I just loved it, and got to ride some then. But I didn't get my own horse until I was probably 12. I started taking care of the neighbors' horses and ponies. We had a barn and some pasture. Took care of them, and I got to ride. We were in Nashville at the time. I'd pack my lunch and pack a book and go off for the day. And so, later I thought, well, that was perfect training to be a sheep herder. And later, got my own horse, and I did the pony club and jumping. And I remember that we'd go to these gymkhanas or shows, and everyone would show up. Their parents would be driving Cadillacs back then, pulling horse trailers, and I would be so envious because an old guy named Jeep would take me to the horse show. He worked at the Public Riding Academy, and he drove the old pickup with a stock rack, and he would come take my horse, and he chewed tobacco, and he spit, and his T-shirts were dirty, and I was always so embarrassed. But thank God we grow up, and now I love that story. But actually, when I was a sophomore, the summer after I was a sophomore in college, I went out west to southern Colorado and took field botany, geology. And we were camped along the banks of the Alamosa River. And during my time there, the bands of sheep started to move right through our camp going up country. And I was, wow, I'd never seen this. I mean, I'd never seen livestock at that scale, and the sheep herders moving with their dogs and horses. And I was enchanted. So that certainly piqued my interest, so that when I came across an opportunity a few years later, 2 or 3 years later, I grabbed it.
So, what took you away from the Bighorn Basin? You moved to Utah, but there wasn't an explanation of what drove you away or lured you to Utah. And culturally, they're very different. Salt
Very
Lake
different.
City.
And, you know,
Yeah.
people have been doing this unsuccessfully for many generations, wanting to solve problems by changing location. Um, by that time I had gotten a permanent job with the Forest Service, which is what I thought I really, really wanted. And by the time I got it, I knew I would never last till retirement. I just would never make it. And I craved a different experience from the government work, which I had felt was so secure and so sought after for me. I just wanted to go experience something completely different. I wanted to live in the city. I wanted to seek out a life that felt more spiritual, mystical, just explore another side of myself. And, you know, I don't regret that phase one bit. I loved it. I learned so much. But of course, I ended up being the exact same person, you know, and ended up coming back to Wyoming and also cherishing my relationship with the land and what I had come to learn about grazing and livestock and working with people. And so, you know, that time was a little bit, the leaving was fleeing a little bit, but it certainly added to my experience and helped me in my next job.
I have two questions based on what you just said. One of them is, generally the Forest Service has a difficult relationship with ranchers and sheepmen and the whole grazing permit. There's a lot of politics and a lot of issues, and they can have a very confrontational sort of a relationship. Yet you had a foot in both worlds. And did that help you, the fact that you were so well known in the ranching community, or did that make your job difficult?
Yeah, no, actually, that was why I got hired, because I had been writing for the Diamond Tail Ranch and started monitoring the allotment. I had, you know, a good botany background and knew enough Latin to kind of get by. And so they hired me to work with, to help manage the grazing allotments. Because I was local, I did know the ranchers, I had a good relationship with them. And, you know, I was the one, when they walked in for their annual meeting, I could welcome them with open arms and help diffuse a lot of the animosity that was normally there. You know, I started out doing plant surveys and clipping grass. By the time I left, I was doing conflict management, you know.
Yeah. So you were a middleman of sorts. You were the kind of the pivot person between the agency and the local community.
You know, and that was true as well once I went to work for the Nature Conservancy. Because in that country, you know, Nature Conservancy was pretty new in that community, and a lot of people viewed it as, you know, environmentalist and, you know, them, and you must be from California, and all of those cliches.
So much was changing then in that era. That was the era of so much change, social change, just in the attitudes toward you know, grazing on public lands and the attitudes toward multiple use and right of way on streams and on and on. I mean, it was just a lot of change going on then.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in the 10 years that I was there, the ranchers that we worked with definitely understood that we considered their ranch lands as prime habitat. We wanted them to succeed. We wanted to help them succeed, and so they came to realize we were on their team.
The other question I had was, you went from a series of jobs where you were alone a great deal of time to becoming a masseuse, which by its very nature brings you into very close and intimate contact with people. And I found that very interesting, that you chose, of all things to study and to transition to, would be a masseuse.
That is interesting. Although I found that practicing massage was, very solitary in some ways, even though I was working intimately with another person. There was not a lot of talking, and
they've got their back to you.
And I mean, especially working at the Cliff Spa, sometimes I would be massaging for 4 to 6 hours straight, and it was like a silent meditation in many, many ways. So that's a great observation, but it actually felt not that different. But it did allow me to explore intimacy. And when I went to work for the Nature Conservancy and ended up in a New York City boardroom asking for $1 million donation or something, having had that experience gave me confidence, a kind of a centered space from which to relate to people, oddly enough.
One of the things that kept occurring to me throughout the book was how lyrical it was, and how did you develop those skills? How did you develop your writing skills? You're a beautiful writer, and not only was there great detail, but some of the passages I marked just because they really captured in a very beautiful way, landscapes that I'm very familiar with, and I just thought, where did you get that? Where did you get that?
Thank you, first of all. I didn't write growing up, and when I was in college, I didn't study English. I had read a lot, but I didn't study English because I didn't want to have to write. I hardly spoke, I said, until I turned about 35, and then I started to yell. But I avoided classes where I had to write. But something in me always wanted to write. I felt like I didn't really own the space, though, that belonged to other people. But after I got divorced, I signed up for an evening creative writing class with the community college. And that is really what got me started. Just having assignments, I started to write about some of the sheep herders, write little vignettes. And I started writing for the local paper. Working for the Forest Service, we had to write a column. So everybody else dreaded that, and I started saying, well, okay, I'm getting paid to write here. And I got good feedback, and so I kept kind of throwing my hat over the wall, and I would write a story, a piece. I just thought my writing was so strange, it didn't seem like anything else I'd read, and I would apply for the literature fellowships through the Arts Council, and I got them. And so, bit by bit, people would ask me to write for them, and I would gnash my teeth and do it. I didn't, until later, I didn't take any classes. I did take, when I was in Salt Lake, I did take a semester with Terry Tempest Williams on creative nonfiction, and that was pivotal. But
Well,
I hacked it out bit by bit.
I think it shows that there was about 2 decades worth of what we call pre-writing and storytelling and gathering the stories and attending to the stories of the people in the communities and the narrative that goes along with learning how to do something you don't know how to do. The whole sheep herding thing of we begin, I think, early on to tell our own stories to ourselves. And I know Suzanne has mentioned that part of yours is about failure. You tell your own story as one of somebody who's inspecting your own success at things and being pretty hard on yourself. Rest of the time, I see just this joy in collecting the narrative that is about what it's like to be out there in the middle of the prairie with about, a zillion sheep around you and a couple of maybe good dogs.
Yeah.
Maybe they're okay. Maybe they mean well. I don't know.
You're right, Judy. And I think that I ended up being driven to write my story, to pick up my experiences and look at them and tell them and make something beautiful out of them. Literally, through the writing of the book, I had to kind of grow up and not write out of anger, not write out of raw sorrow, right? And so the writing really kept me on a path. And in the writing, I came to feel like, wow, I have lived a beautiful life. It changed my view of my life from failure to incredible experience, beautiful stories, which cheaper than therapy, right?
Was there a moment, a very conscious moment, that you wanted to turn it into a book, or did you just start writing? I mean, I find the whole concept of writing a book daunting. It's one thing to form your stories.
So do we.
Yeah,
I am right now, and I have never written a word in my life, and I'm writing fiction, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and I get lost because I keep looking at that big picture, and and you have to just, for me to write it all, I have to stay right in the moment, stay with that scene, and not look at what it's going to be, or else I just get stalled.
Yeah.
But,
these collections, these chapters were they held together, and they were certainly progressive. But all of the stories were it creates a novel for sure. But it wasn't written that way. It was more written in terms of.
It was written. The pieces were written individually. Some of the pieces that are in the book were written individually. And I tried to put them together. I finally decided I'd like to do a book. I'd like to do this sort of collection of personal essays, whatever that is. And worked on that for a long time. And when I felt like I got that just as good as I could get it, I shared it with my friend Mark Sprague, writer friend, and he offered to put it in front of his editor, Gary Fiskajon at Knopf, and I never would have asked for that, but he offered. And Gary said, sure, send it my way, and he was getting on a flight to Nashville and said, print, just email it, and I'll print it out and read it on the way. And he wrote me an email that said, "Hi, Charlene. I'm on a call. Said, come do whatever you need to do." His words to me were, the first 100 pages of what you've done is the most beautiful. It's the best I've ever read about that life. But let me tell you how the rest disappoints me. And he reflected on the fact that I had the first part of what I'd written, he had no idea where I was going. He was following me. He felt like I was a good guide. He was ready to go wherever I took him until I started writing essays and writing as though I knew where I was going. And he said, I lost interest. He said, it's good and you could publish it right now. He wasn't going to publish it. But he said, think about taking it apart and writing it as personal. A narrative memoir. And so that rang true with me, and I thanked him, and I took it back, and I took it apart. And the pieces that I thought I couldn't change a word of, I took apart, and I threw some out, and I wrote the pieces that I really didn't think I could write. Like the piece about Grady. I didn't see any way that I could write that piece, and then it became one of my favorite pieces. So I wrote the book that I didn't think I had the courage to write, and I shed more tears. But I worked on it again for almost 2 years, and I gave it back to him, and he said, "Bingo, let's put it on the cover."
Wow.
So it definitely evolved over the years and became a better book for it.
It's a tremendous effort. That's I've really appreciated being able to talk with some of you authors. I mean, I don't think we readers really understand the effort that goes into creating a book of this quality. It's it's worse than giving birth. My goodness.
Well, some people too will, especially with nonfiction and especially with memoir. There's this sense that all you have to do is tell your story, and it's like, well, with a piece of stone, all you have to do is take away the parts that aren't an elk, and you have a nice sculpture of an elk. The creation of the art of writing, I think, is what a lot of people you don't understand until you're in it. It's
right.
Hard work. It's hard work. It's frustrating. It's never quite right. I bet you can
Never. At some point, you have to just leave it behind.
Let it go. I used to think, well, my children aren't perfect either, and I let them leave home. So okay, yeah.
So, what was your parents' reaction, Laura? I mean, they really are ghosts in the background.
My parents are, they're so courageous, and they embraced it and were very proud of me. My mother did read it, and one of her first comments was, "Did I know that you'd had an abortion?" So I think, I don't think you did.
No.
But, she's a busy woman. She's got 5 kids, and, got a busy life. No, they were very proud, and sang my praises. And my father's words when I was on book tour and I was staying in their home for the Lexington reading. See if I can remember what he said to me. He said, as I've done counseling as a minister, he said, I've always looked for the child within the adult, that hurt child, and that's who I minister to. He said, until I read your book, I never knew that that was in you. I never knew who that child was, and so I thought he nailed it.
Yeah.
What I love about that story is the fact that they embrace your version of events without. My parents were more like holding up their hands, saying, "You just tell them whatever you want, whatever they want to hear." You know, they divorced themselves entirely from my version of events, and while they've supported the book a lot, but it's not with that same, "Oh, we didn't know that you felt that way," sort of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
It is, and it's it's to his credit.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, yours were more defensive, more.
Well, they also, I think, I had left the ranch by then, which is another way of making judgment on their,
Right.
you know, way of life and what they do for a living. And so, of course, they were defensive. Also, in a very small community like that, they had all their neighbors reading about them, you know, and that's can be hard.
Right, right. You know, I don't know that my parents were not possibly a bit hurt. You know, hurt.
It's hard for a writer in the family.
To be able to love our children in the way they want to be loved.
Yes.
None of us want to see a reflection
Yes.
that we don't want to see.
Well,
But,
and parents were never perfect. You know, I know when I made mistakes, and yeah.
But I think that's the hard part is, as children, you think your parents are perfect, and so it's that understanding on both sides. You know?
I knew right away.
You knew right away. My children knew right away for sure. That's for sure. Mac, do we have some questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions and comments. Hold on a second. I'm gonna have Harriet take over for a second. She has the biggest question.
Shit.
So it's been a really interesting time on the NES camera. Harriet took off and just had a fight with another osprey, it looks like.
Yeah, I saw. Maybe they're fighting. Maybe they're not fighting.
Oh, maybe this is a suitor.
It could be a suitor. They were going at it in the air, and she was dive bombing in a way that didn't look so great. But maybe it's a suitor. I don't really know. No expert.
They mate in the air.
Sorry to interrupt your chat with that, but that's what everybody's pretty excited about.
Harriet's
right
the
now, so I thought I'd let
osprey.
you know.
We've been upstaged, Laura.
I apologize.
happily.
Absolutely. Everybody's waiting for the suitor, for sure.
Exciting. It was exciting. I tried to catch it as best as I could on the NES camera, but it was difficult. Sorry. So that little interlude. However, there also were some questions and comments. Let me just get back to them. I'm trying to get everything sorted here real quick. So give me 1 second.
Okay. Mac, unenviable job. Mac has the unenviable job of being a camera operator on 2 cameras plus, you know, sitting in on the chat. So,
Moderating,
yeah, a multitasker for sure.
Thank you very much.
A little tricky.
It can be tricky.
Okay, so let's see here. It looks like there was a question. Harriet's question was she wanted to know what it was like working with Terry Tempest Williams in a workshop.
Did you hear that, Laura?
Yeah. Oh gosh, she was so inspiring. When I took that class, and it was a whole semester, she and her husband had just gotten their home in southern Utah, and were in the process of moving in. And so we met at the beginning of that semester and got our reading assignments. We met for the first month, and then she moved south, and we worked on our projects and wrote papers and communicated with her, and then met the last month. She inspired me to be brave in my writing and, you know, write the story that will break your heart. To look for that story which, as you said, Judy, is not just telling a story. It is searching for the story.
Um,
And
she tends to investigate the emotional qualities of the stories too, and she's one of the ones I know Bill Kittredge would always say, if you are not risking sentimentality, you're not even close. And with her work, it's difficult not to become emotionally engaged with her stories and even with her teaching.
Yeah. So I was very inspired by her class, and really she pushed me. I worked on the piece Burnt Mountain about my parents in her class, and
Perfect choice.
She's very much a part of that piece.
Yeah, that's a perfect choice of material to work, with her. She understands so many layers of family relationship and that sort of thing. I mean, it's just one of the things she does really well.
Can you teach yourself to do that? Is that a skill you can acquire, to find those emotional layers?
Yes. But you have to have someone reading it and pushing you back into it. I will see students that are working toward a core, and it's like peeling onions or cracking nuts or any of the other, cliches, but every once in a while you'll see them dodge. Well, my father was pretty strict, but we got along fine. Okay, that's a dodge. What does that mean exactly? And, why are you avoiding that issue? Is there something that you can't raise a red flag and then put it down and walk away? You have to go there. If you bring it up, you've got to go there. And that means that somebody's got to hold your tootsies to the fire and say, well, that's a lot better. You're getting there. There's some meat in here, and I can see you beginning to risk. You have to risk, and you've got to maybe risk that your mother's sitting on your shoulder reading as you go, and it can be pretty hard to do.
Whispering in your ear.
Yeah, you don't want to hurt people's feelings,
right.
and yet your story is inextricably caught up in other people's stories. You can't write your own without attending to your relationship with other people. So it can be hard.
And it seemed to me that your editor played the initial editor, and I remember you're talking about your book too, that the editor's role was really critical in doing that, holding people's feet to the fire to get at those layers. Is that right?
Certainly. I wrote mine over the course of 10 years, and so there were many fires in my life, but I didn't have, because I was going to school and I was working full-time and I had 3 kids, I didn't have sort of the luxury of being a writer. I was a writer part of the day, and so it took me a long time. I came to these lessons a lot more slowly than I think Laura did. I mean, it seems to me yours is kind of organic in the way that your investigation of the element of your life forms kind of an organic emotional core. It builds. I mean, we come to understand you arrive on a whim in a certain sense, and yet you stay, and you grow roots, and then you grow wings, and then you grow roots again. So
life goes on.
Yeah, it does.
And challenges never end.
Laura, did you stick with that original editor? Did you continue to work with him over that 2-year period that you went back and wrote the real story?
We had some back and forth on email. He typically, and actually Mark Sprague was saying, he typically does not put a book under contract or really respond to a manuscript till he feels like it's 95% there. He doesn't want it to be his book. So Mark was pretty surprised that he gave me the feedback that he did. So, you know, we emailed a little bit back and forth, but I didn't show him anything until I felt like I had it as good as I could get it. But I had written a piece called Moving Camp that wove together the backcountry trips into Yellowstone with that summer after Jenny's death and writing about her death. It was one piece, and he, you know, I thought it was the best thing I'd ever written. I couldn't change a word, but he challenged me to revisit. And so 5 years after I had written that piece, I rewrote it as 2 different pieces.
Wow.
And, you know, went back in a way I really hadn't been able to do before. So he was not fine line editing. He was challenging me, though, conceptually during that time. And then once he did actually edit it, you know, I cried when the manuscript came back to me. Some pages had more writing on it than I had written. But he said,
what a joy.
I will never unless you want me to read it. Take it or leave it. It's your book. But I'm just suggesting and illuminating and asking questions. But it's your book. You do with it what you write.
Wow.
And as a professional now, you know what an honor that is to have someone read and edit you that closely. It almost never happens that somebody is willing to invest their time and attention at that level. That is truly a gift.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
I had started to work with a couple of editors earlier before I had very much control. And there were people that wanted to shape the book, opening essays that happen 30 pages long, that kind of thing. And I backed away.
You know, it's becoming clear to me that editing and writing are 2 very different skill sets, and that it's the combination that the writer who you know, if you can find the right editor, it seems like you can really push something to a whole new level.
Right.
Is that right?
And I think both Laura and I too worked with very experienced editors who weren't trying to write our book for us.
Yeah.
And some of I know enough beginning writers who are working with editors or trying to work with agents who are just impossible. They are contradicting the editors or the writers. I'm sorry. And it's youth. They know everything. They're young. They're 24 years old and they've got a degree in English Lit. But it can be.
I wish I had one.
You can have mine.
Let me see if we have more questions. Mac, do we have any more questions from our chatters?
Yeah, there's definitely a few comments here. The lady mentioned that she thought you were doing a really good job addressing all the questions that have come up already, so that's why we're not having quite as many, is because all the chats you guys had before, she's been seeing that you keep answering the questions before she even asks them. So that was a comment from the lady. It came up with Mary, and it came up with Gabby. They both want you to write a book, Suzanne, so you better get working with these guys on some credit for editing. I don't know, you're probably going to have to offer a bunch of horse rides to get some good editing out of that. Let's see, there was one other comment that I wanted to let you guys know about. I just got to find it here. Sorry, excuse the delay.
That's all right. You're doing a great job.
Oh, there was a question about if you guys recommend any Terry Tempest Williams books during that whole discussion. And then I think, too, it might be nice to hear of any other books that maybe you're reading right now, or that you would highly recommend, one or two.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that, particularly with Judy. Um, these books that you've selected for us have just been outstanding, every one of them. And outside of our regularly scheduled book chats, we chat about what's going on, and people will say, "I am so glad I did this book club." And I started the evening by coming in and complaining to Judy that she had ruined me again, because I had branched off into cheap literature that I could put down, and I said to my husband, I know why I don't read good literature, because I can't put it down and it interrupts my life. And so she's gotten me back into good literature, and there I am, sitting up late at night. But it's been wonderful. It's just been a really, really good experience, and so maybe we need a little bit of a reading list.
I think too that you need to rethink a life that does not include reading good literature as part of it. It doesn't interrupt your life. It is part of
My
your
life. There you go. There you go.
So,
There you go.
you need to read The Refuge, which is the iconic Terry Tempest Williams book, and it is. I mean, you can go from there to everything else she's written. She's written a lot about personal essays about the West. She's a very smart woman, and but The Refuge was her. It introduces us to the woman and her family, and where she grew up. In the middle of the desert, within spitting distance of the mushroom clouds, and the effect then on her family. She incorporates her story with the problems with the Great Salt Lake and the birds and the refuge there, the refuge, and so the word refuge means several different things. I mean, we look at refuge, we look at home, and what is home, and we look at refuge, we look at the bird refuge. She just has a very sort of deep, and I like the term you use is inspired, and I do think that she writes from a really sort of deep well within herself. Book lists.
Yeah. Maybe I'll ask both of you to email me 3 good books that we ought to be reading.
Oh, that would be great. I will do that.
And I will share them with our readers.
Yeah.
And this is our final book in our Western Women's Book Series. This was a very experimental thing to do, this book club, and I've been surprised by how well it has worked. People have really enjoyed this, and I want to continue this, and I can't thank Judy enough for having stuck with me on this and experimented. It was a grand experiment,
Yep.
and it's really enriched people's lives. It certainly has enriched mine. And we will continue with something of this sort next year. I'm not exactly sure what our focus will be. I will be darkening Judy's door again. The poor woman, she won't get rid of me. But I just wanted to thank you for everything, for the whole series. And Laura, I'm going to go on to your other book. I'm intrigued by your beautiful lyrical writing. I'm so grateful to have been introduced to your writing. And I hope that you do join our group. I think people would love to hear your voice from wherever you are.
I will come now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
It's
such an honor to be with you guys tonight, and I'm so grateful that you asked me.
Oh.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much. And with that, I'm going to say good night. Thank you, Mackenzie, for all the great work, for trying to keep track of Harriet and Laura and Judy and I all at the same time. A man with many
I
skills.
tell you, we all just have wings, yeah. And readers, if the readers have books to suggest,
Yes, yes, indeed.
send them in. I think that we could do another 2 sections of Western women writers, and we wouldn't. I mean, I've got 4 more books that
Yeah.
it's great stuff.
Well, and in the West in general, Mark Sprague, I have
Yes.
read Where the Rivers Change Directions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a gorgeous book, just a beautiful book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So thank
Hey,
you.
if you guys have a quick minute, there just are a couple of last comments from everyone. Since it's the last one, I wanted to let you guys know, and I'm happy to do it.
Okay.
Gabby mentioned that she hasn't been able to get to read all the books, but she's really enjoyed the interviews very much, and she's going to read them at some point. And Delady wanted to just say thank you to everyone who helped put it on, and Gabby wanted to say thanks as well. And Celia says thank you, Suzanne and Judy, and all the wonderful authors, and me. Thank you as well. You're welcome. Let's see, there was another. And then let's see, it looks like the lady said thank you up there, and please do this again next winter. And Gabby's sorry that it's over for the year. She's gonna miss it. A lot of people are also gonna catch the last of this a little bit later because they got all caught up in Harriet, so they paused you guys. So I saw a few comments saying that. So I'm sure there's a lot more gratitude and well wishes from everyone. Mary also wants to say thank you to everybody, and that it was such a great idea, and she enjoyed the books and the discussions very, very much. So thank you guys. It's been really fun on my end getting to watch and talk, even though I also haven't been able to follow along with the books, unfortunately, but I'm excited to read your book, Laura, and thanks again. And it was a wonderful session tonight, and whenever you guys are ready to say goodbye, I will switch you back off.
Well, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, and we'll email, and I hope to meet you someday.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night, all.
Bye.